Our 40-year-old GE transmitter was showing its age, and we had to be prepared for the digital transition coming up. So, we needed to install a new digital transmitter and replace our old analog one. This was going to be quite a project, since everything had to fit inside our present room, and we had to keep the GE transmitter on the air until everything was finished. The old GE transmitter. This is how the original transmitter looked. It was built in the 1960s by General Electric. Here's the control panel. Here's a shot of the top of one of the Klystron amplifiers. And here's the high voltage cage with its 6 transformers. Making room. In order to make room for the new transmitter and keep the old one on at the same time, certain cabinets had to be removed. Fortunately, not all the cabinets were in use at this time. One of the visual Klystrons was not in use, the second high voltage control cabinet, and the exciter cabinet was not in use. I was especially grateful that the tube exciter was no longer in use and that we had a solid state one. Here you can see all the cabinets that were going to be removed in order to make room for the new one. In the back here was a storage area that just had to be cleaned out, and this is where the new transmitter was going to be installed. The demolition begins. Here you can see 1/2 of the control/high voltage cabinet, and here's the parts of it leaning against the wall. Making room required making quite a mess. Here's a set of high voltage rectifier stacks. The beam supply, or high voltage cage, had to be modified in order to make room for the new transmitter. Here you can see how I'd removed part of the fence and installed my own to protect people from walking into the high voltage cage. Now, with the back mostly cleaned up, we could start on the cabinets. Here is the visual cabinet that we were removing. We used both sawzalls and grinders to cut through the steel. Everything had to be cut down to size to fit through the doorway. And this is what the room was to look like at the end. RF plumbing. The GE transmitter used RF patch base and a filtered diplexer, but these will be left in place until the GE is finally removed. Rooftop heat exchanger. This is the rooftop heat exchanger building for the GE transmitter. This is what cools the transmitter and keeps it running. And here's the electrical controls for it. As you can see, they're getting very old. The room was dismantled around the heat exchanger because one of them had to stay on to keep the GE transmitter running. Here's a before and after picture. Here's one of the coils before it was removed. Cutting holes. The hallway and doorway to the transmitter room was too small to fit the new transmitter equipment down, so we had to cut a hole through the wall to fit it in. So here's how the transmitter room looks at the end of all the demolition. A hole in the wall and a large space for the new transmitter. I invite you to watch part 2, which shows how we installed the new transmitters.